Hi, everybody. My name's Cynthia Ryan. I'm the Executive Director of the Vestibular Disorders Association, and I'm here today with Joey Remenyi with seekingbalance.com.au, and I am so excited to talk to her today about her experience as a vestibular patient. Welcome, Joey.
Thank you. I have a long history with Veda, so it's kind of surreal to be here on this side.
I totally get it. I totally get it. Well, let's just start with having you tell me about the first time you started experiencing vestibular symptoms and what that was like. What was your experience of it?
Yeah, well, it's hard to pinpoint it. I know the exact moment I recognized I had vestibular symptoms because at that point I was a vestibular audiologist. I knew all about it. I treated lots of people and I was like, whoa. And I woke up one morning with spinning and I could see the room spinning, and it was classic BPPV, benign paroxysmal positional vertigo, which is nothing to worry about. It's easy to treat, easy to diagnose. And I, in fact, it was anxiety producing, but I could treat myself, get myself to work, ask a colleague to immediately test and treat me. And I'm pretty sure they sent me home that day. However, before that, I have a history of being very anxious, very sensitive, migraine, and visual distortion, not feeling quite right, feeling that there's a party in my brain. I would not have known any of that was vertigo. So this is my pre-vestibular education life. And my mum also used to spend days in bed maybe 3 times a year with migraine, or she'd run a bath and close the door and be like, don't disturb me. So I had this role modeling of kind of shutting down a few days a year in a mum used to call it self-preservation, and neck pain and holding her head and visual distortions. And so I did that. To me wasn't necessarily viewed as medical or even particularly abnormal because it was something I'd grown up with. So yes, I know I would say through hormonal changes in my adolescence, I experienced some of these symptoms and distortions, and I kind of try and gently call them not quite right sensations. But yes, they certainly became more intense and much more difficult to ignore or pretend weren't happening in my mid to late 20s. And that was when I started questioning, can I even go to a restaurant? Can I go out for a meal with friends? Can I drive my car? Am I safe? It's that feeling of like the rug's been just pulled from underneath me. My internal compass is missing and I don't know where's up or down anymore. I imagine it's that similar feeling I have like if I go underwater and then I don't know where the surface is. So it's like, well, how do I get to the top? Where is it? So yeah, I mean, I can talk about this all day, but I would say it started in adolescence and then it got much worse in my mid to late 20s. And that, as with many people, I think there's a hereditary genetic component, but at that point in my life, I had experienced a row of traumas and my body was depleted. I was emotionally all confused and messy, and my brain was starting to misfire and misjudge, and the calculations weren't on the ball. And so then the vestibular experience became a part of my daily life. So yeah, I understand it all so much better now in hindsight than I did back then.
Yes, don't we all? And there are 2 things that you said that really that I connected with, because I hear them a lot when I talk to vestibular patients, is one, you had these feelings of not quite right for a long time, but you normalized them. You thought they were just part of life and that it was something that would just go away on its own, even though it kept coming up, before you put a label on it, even as a vestibular healthcare provider. And number 2, as a vestibular healthcare provider, you had this experience, a traumatic experience of BPPV, of spinning vertigo. So you knew consciously, intellectually what was going on, but you still reacted with anxiety. So imagine what it's like for someone who doesn't know what's going on, and especially if they're told that it's just nothing.
Oh yeah, it's huge. And also, like, different people react differently. Like, I did have a client once who was a stand-up comedian and just the most amazing person with objective perspective. And she's the only person I've ever met who can go through severe spinning and have like almost zero emotional reaction, like just really calm, like almost thinking, how can I put this into my next comedy sketch? Like, that's extremely rare. It's much more common to have this feeling of, where am I, what's going on, how long is it going to last, and to freak out and to get all this natural anxiety going on. That's a normal brain response. And for personalities like me, I have a baseline of anxiety. And I actually think, in hindsight now that I've got all this therapeutic experience, so my background, my first degree is psychology, specialized in neuroscience. I took extra training in acceptance commitment therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, and I did my master's in vestibular audiology. So I chose to not work with hearing aids and was fascinated by the balance system. And at the age of 15, I chose to start a really disciplined study of yoga. And I did these really incredible traditional apprenticeships of yoga, an enormous amount of training. And that has spanned over 20 years. So my relationship to yoga is really almost my first study. And then the academic stuff came later. But the reason I share this is because like, I'm highly anxious. I'm a classic candidate for triple PD. I've got all those hypervigilant markers. I think the world is going to fall on top of me. Something bad's going to happen. That's my baseline temperament and personality. And so, yeah, even though I had this vestibular knowledge, I knew how to treat BPPV, I knew it could come and go, I knew it wasn't serious. It's almost like, and same with my not quite right feelings and vestibular migraine, it was almost like there was a part of me that was like, well, I'm just fundamentally wrong. I'm an abnormal person. Of course this is going to happen to me. And so there was this relationship to my body, and the symptoms were kind of proving me right. I'm like, yeah, I knew I was abnormal. I've always been abnormal. And people might say, well, why would you think that, Joey? That doesn't make sense. Well, if I dig a little bit deeper, and I've spoken about this with my mum recently, is that when I was a little baby and around the age of 1, like 12 months, when mum shifted me from breastfeeding to bottle feeding with cow milk, I started to get pretty intense asthma, and I was hospitalized. And that intense asthma really punctuated my entire childhood all the way through to that age of 15. And I have got a lot of memories of blacking out, of not having enough oxygen, you know, really shifting in consciousness. I have memories of being put in the corner of the schoolroom with a huge ventilator mask on my face, and it's a really noisy apparatus. You turn it on and it's like a motorbike engine going. You know, I was allergic to the grass and the pollen and cats. I have memories of going for sleepovers at friends' houses and having to be sent home because I couldn't breathe because their parent was a smoker. So what this means psychologically is, from a very young age, I felt like my body was a failure. I couldn't even breathe. So like, how abnormal does that get? And I had a lot of trust issues. I think that fed the anxiety. And I think that from a neuroplasticity point of view, that really set up those structures in my brain to not trust my body, to not trust the world, because I'm highly allergic to things, and that leads to hospitalization and can't breathe. So don't trust the world around me. And then, of course, throw into the melting pot that I said to mum, now that I'm a mother, I said, why did you keep feeding me cow milk? Like, why not just try an alternative milk? And she's like, well, back then that was just what you did. It was like, okay, my daughter's sensitive, she's got asthma, so be it. So not that it was only mum giving me that message, it was also at school with friends, with other adults. It was like, well, you're sensitive, get over it. You're sensitive, deal with it. Like, there was, the message kind of was, well, I can't trust anybody because I'm sensitive and allergic to everything, and that's not okay. So basically, my coping mechanism was to be cheerful, to be bright, to fake it, to push through. And that was my life. And really now I'm in my mid-30s and I'm realizing, wow, how exhausting, you know. And so now I've had the great privilege of work. I mean, it's kind of makes so much sense now why I work in what I work in. And I think why I was fascinated by the vestibular conditions was because I really felt what the clients were going through. And I'd meet people and they're describing the spinning and the stomach falling and like having a pinball machine in their brain sensations, or feeling dissociated, or like an astronaut. I'm like, yep, felt that, yep, felt that, yep, felt that. And so anyway, I had great empathy and compassion for what people were going through. But at the same time, I was in a very privileged position of seeing some people heal, some people get through it, other people remain stuck. And I started to professionally question why, what's missing. And then rather than believing my status quo was just the way it was and I had to live with it forever, I started to question, can I change it? Can I consciously heal it? What's the missing piece? And I mean, I can talk for hours on this, but essentially I had 4 very difficult years of feeling very anxious, very alone, very traumatized, depression, isolation. I did go through a suicidal period of just wanting out. I was never suicidal, there's a difference, but I was experiencing those thoughts and just really needing to isolate myself. And so for me, it felt like this apprenticeship of figuring out my own neuroplasticity, my own healing. It was very lonely, but I'm super grateful for that 4-year period because I think it really gave me perspective, compassion, empathy. And in the end of it, I had this incredible toolkit of skills I could draw upon to help my brain soothe, settle, and recalibrate. So I think I'll stop there, but yeah.
There was, you know, something that you mentioned that I wanted to just kind of repeat because I think that a lot of people feel this way. You said that one of your coping strategies was to be cheerful. And I think that, I think that that a lot of vestibular patients and people with chronic illness become that way because, you know, at first maybe they feel like, you know, they want to share what's going on with them. They want to explain, they want others to understand. And at first others are understanding and they're like, oh, that sounds really awful. But when it keeps going and it doesn't get better, you know, I've heard people say that, you know, oh, well, you know, when I post something on my Facebook page, for example, that I'm having a vestibular problem today, my friends are like, oh, is that still going on? Because you know, it seems like you got better. So they start having to, well, they just kind of start covering it up because they feel like it's not well received, that they're not going to get support for having this chronic problem. So how did, you know, you were saying that's, you know, how you used to be, and how do you think that's changed for you with both your, you know, your psychology background and your experience with neuroplasticity?
Well, I went through all the classic things that I hear people going through, and this is around the world. It's not unique to Australia or the US at all. In that, when I was going through my difficult period and really just feeling so incredibly abnormal and feeling like such a failure, and I didn't know it at the time, but I was completely shamed about my body and my experiences. And I would say quite embarrassed to talk about them, actually, especially because I was a yoga teacher and I had that kind of, well, I should have like the yoga was a gift because it kept me connected to my body and it gave me a way to rebalance. And I had this toolkit. But then I was hiding the fact that I was constantly having to work at being steady and stable and clear. And so I was hiding it, I think, but I did go to see psychologists and I didn't actually find that very enlightening. I didn't need vestibular physiotherapy because a lot of that's based on yoga anyway, so I already had that. very well established. I did speak to neurologists, and I had bothersome tinnitus as well. And I started to see how my relationship to what I'm sensing and hearing would change the intensity of it. And so I started to put all the pieces together and realize I could actually have more control over what I was sensing, hearing, and feeling than anybody was teaching me, or even perhaps anybody was aware of. And so I could play with it. But I think, coming back to your question, I also knew technically that vestibular disorders are not stable states. It's not like having an amputated limb. And so that's why, if people view it as such, it can get a bit murky to describe to other people, because the reality is our sensory system is moving with life and with the world around us. So it depends on our emotional state. It depends on the weather. It depends on the time of month if you're a woman. It depends on work commitments, family commitments. All of these mini stressors in life, or bigger stressors in life, actually change the biochemistry of our body and change what we sense, feel, and hear. So our sensations are moving with us and growing with us. And that is why neuroplasticity is so effective actually in healing, because it's so dynamic and changeable, and we can teach the brain how to filter and categorize certain error messages. And if people don't have those skills, and I did not have those skills, I had to learn the hard way, then we can feel very victim to what we're experiencing, because it just comes out of nowhere and it's frightening. And then I feel like I'm an abnormal person again, and I get caught up in the loop. But I suppose I did understand that I could have good periods and I could have difficult periods. And I think another piece is I didn't expect anyone to understand me. I felt so complex and so abnormal. I didn't actually expect an outsider to understand it. And at best, the feedback would be just like almost pity, like, oh, that sounds tough. Let's change the topic now and talk about something else. So it didn't seem very fruitful talking about it, even to my audiology colleagues.
I think a lot of people, I've heard, and now I'm kind of getting into the, you mentioned neuroplasticity, and there was something else in there that you mentioned that I wanted to ask about. A lot of people, when they are, when you talk about, just if you change your attitude towards something, then, it will change how you feel about it. And they're like, well, it's not so easy as that. It's not just mind over matter. But you mentioned, the biochemical reactions that happen in the brain when you change an emotional state, for example. Can you explain how that works?
Yeah. And I touch on this in the book I've just written. So essentially, I mean, to a certain degree at this point in my life, I feel like, so healing definitely has physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual elements. And I feel like the spiritual piece is often overlooked, and I'm thinking it's probably the most important. And by spiritual, I don't mean religious. I mean, what do I believe in? Do I believe in my body to heal? And when I was at my worst, I was looking for an outside fix. I wanted someone to tell me what to do. I wanted that pill. I wanted that device. I tried everything. And it was exhausting. And of course, nobody understood what I was feeling, and nobody could magically fix me. At best, they could numb me, numb it. And so from a spiritual perspective, I had like no faith in my body, and I didn't believe in myself. And I have shared this experience in previously on other calls, but the turning point for me was when I actually gave myself a ritualistic funeral. I was like, I'm out, I'm done. And I laid on the floor beds of my bedroom. I said goodbye to the sun, the stars, the moon, my family, my friends, everybody in my mind's eye. And I lay down and I did this like mock death ceremony where I was just like, I don't want to live anymore. And it was really meaningful. I think I was there for about an hour. My nervous system just completely slowed down, which did mean that when I finally had enough of being dead, playing dead, I was like, okay, I'm ready to live now. Like, I've had enough of being dead. And something shifted. And I think what really died was that need for something else or someone else to fix me. Because when I got up, it was like I suddenly had this tiny spark of hope. And of course, because my nervous system was so slowed down, I felt dizzy getting up, and it took me like 15 minutes to get up. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do now? And I just thought, I just want the sun on my body. I just wanted light. And I put my bathers on and I walked to the pool. I didn't go swimming. I just lay on the grass and I let the sun bathe me and warm me. And it felt like a very important piece of me died. And that was a spiritual, almost rite of passage, that I let go of being the victim and the maiden and the little girl and the distressed, screaming, desperate, help me, fix me, fix me. And I shifted into, okay, I have no idea how I'm going to heal, but I feel willing to try, and I feel willing to work it out, and I feel willing to say, I'm going to do it for myself. And that was a huge transition. And that was the spiritual piece. It's kind of subtle, but also major. And from that place, I just started very slowly to build my strength, build my confidence, regulate my emotions. It might have been a whole year later that I actually discovered for myself self-compassion and what that meant to hold and nurture myself and be tender to myself. So basically, the brain chemistry in that story is when I was in my desperation, needing someone to fix me, feeling so helpless, hopeless, powerless, and stuck, the brain chemistry is really getting the fight, flight, freeze on repeat all day long. Even while I'm sleeping, it's the adrenaline and the cortisol, and the chemical cocktails are, I don't trust this, I don't trust myself, I'm not safe. And that is basically the chemical state I'm living in. From a neuroplasticity point of view, which is our brain and body's capacity to change and reset and rearrange itself like road networks, that can't happen in that state. If we're in fight, flight, freeze with that adrenaline, cortisol, brain cocktail in a chronic situation, it actually changes the shape of our brain and changes our brain for the worse. It's well, we all know the impacts of chronic stress. It's everywhere, from skin issues to digestive issues. It's the body's main maintenance biology is deprioritized. And the reason for that, quite simply, is because the brain says, okay, Joey's really worried about something. There must be a saber-toothed tiger or some kind of violent person around the corner that she's got to get ready to run away from. So I'm just going to have her ready in like flight, ready to go. Anyway, so then fast forward to my journey of self-kindness, learning about emotional regulation in a new way, a more adult way, and learning how to be more tender and gentle with myself. Suddenly I shifted my brain chemistry, and those chemical cocktails were now more oxytocin and dopamine and these beautiful hormones and neurotransmitters that actually helped me to feel more stable, steady, settled, and eventually to feel courage, confidence, and inner peace. And I could strategically and methodically build those chemical cocktails in myself through knowing what I was feeling and supporting that, and B, knowing what I wanted to feel and how to get there. It's extremely personal, and no therapist on the planet could tell me how to do that. And I was talking with Cynthia earlier, I don't recommend anything to clients anymore because I don't know them. And so we can't give these blanket generic recommendations of try yoga, try mindfulness, try meditation, because the reality is we don't know how your brain will react to that. Your brain chemistry might freak out, which would make it a completely insensitive recommendation. And so this is where I've come to a new style of therapy that says, actually, as an expert, I can inform you about your inner ears in your brain, and I can give you education about how it's all moving through your emotional systems and how they're related, and how the system can have error messages and how it has the potential to heal. How you're going to do that is a self-study process that you will nurture yourself through. It's not something the external expert can dictate. And so this is where it's It's a new style of therapy, which is very much about self-inquiry and building self-trust, which I don't know what you think, Cynthia, but I think that is often a missing link. I don't think I was unique there. I think a lot of people are missing that trust in their body, in themselves, and in the process, and regathering that trust is a very courageous process often.
Yeah, and you were talking about for you, seeing a psychotherapist wasn't it wasn't what you needed, but I think that the psychological part of being uh, a chronic illness patient, or having a chronic illness, is a really important part of it, and everybody has a different pathway to learning to trust themselves, and sometimes it can be helpful to have someone guide you through that. So I definitely encourage people to because I think that a lot of people think that seeking out psychological support is admitting that you're broken, or admitting that this vestibular problem is all in your head, which is exactly what they're fighting against. When doctors tell them, oh, it's just stress, but
Yeah,
to like you said, to have self-compassion and to accept that this is happening on many levels. It's physical, it's cognitive, it's psychological, and all of those things
yeah.
need to be addressed.
And I guess what I would add to that is it's actually not necessarily about the training of the expert. So it doesn't matter whether you see a psychologist specializing in cognitive behavior therapy or psychotherapy, or a craniosacral therapist, or something different. I think what the research shows is it's about having a trusting relationship with a therapist who can help you be with your body, be with what arises, and engage in this dialogue of, okay body, what are you telling me? How can I nurture you? How can I listen to your body? Because the human body is a miracle. It's incredibly intelligent. It knows what it's doing. And often these not quite right sensations are actually part of our biology saying, hey, listen to me. And that's a very personal inner process. And having a therapist or a deep, respectful friend who doesn't judge us, to walk with us in this process of listening and exploring and trial and error, because we don't actually know what we're going to be feeling in 2 seconds time or in 10 minutes time. It's this, I need to be open to the unfolding and responsive in a really gentle way, instead of prescriptive, and I'm going to repeat this 3 times a day. And the reason I say that is because sometimes people think, oh, well, I just got told I need CBT, so if that doesn't work, then that's it. There's no other option. And that's not true. It's not about the CBT fixing, or the acceptance commitment therapy fixing, or the medication drug fixing. It's really a very complex tapestry of interwoven thoughts, feelings, sensations, and beliefs, and how the brain is using those. Because when we don't feel right, it's because it's coming in through traffic jams, or various sensations are being categorized as life-threatening, when really they need to be recategorized as boring and in the sock drawer. And so teaching the brain how to use these sensations and feelings, how to redefine and explore belief systems that are updated to the 2020 settings, instead of having beliefs from our childhood. A little bit like I described with my asthma and feeling like the world's falling apart and I can't trust anyone or trust my body. That belief was actually going all the way through into my adult days. And it started when I was a little girl.
Mm-hmm.
So as an adult, I had to then explore, okay, well, is that belief serving me? Is it even true? Is it helpful? And can I rewrite it? Can I redefine it? Can I find a new, more meaningful, authentic belief that positions me better now as a young woman, as a mother, as a career person, etc.
Right.
And it's ongoing. It's not like
Right.
I'm perfect. It's an ongoing inquiry.
Yeah, being conscious of it is the start, and accepting where you are, wherever that is. I mean, like you were, my husband's a psychotherapist, and he often says, emotions, they're transitory. You're going to feel an emotion, and then it's going to pass. And so long as you're conscious of that in the moment, then you don't get swept up in it. And if we're conscious of what it is we're feeling, and that this too, it's this feeling, even if it's an uncomfortable feeling, the anxiety or whatever it is you're feeling is okay, and that you will get through it so long as you're conscious of that. It can help you to get through that. So you mentioned that you are now a mother. So tell us about how that experience has affected your vestibular symptoms. The hormones we hear can really affect you on a vestibular level. And of course, there's just so much going on physically, mentally, emotionally.
Yeah. So basically the way I view these vestibular conditions is they're very physical. So first of all, they're not all in your head and you're not making it up. But the reality is what we're thinking, feeling, and sensing and believing impact the physical stuff. So the way the messages from the ears are traveling through the midbrain and to the cortical brain actually goes through a biological system that is full of hormones and is experiencing life and is responding and reacting to primitive emotions and thoughts and beliefs. So they're all interwoven. And I also just want to clarify here, for me, healing and recovery does not mean complete elimination of symptoms and cure that they will never be experienced again. And the reason it doesn't mean that for me is because we can't predict what happens in life. And a great example of that is when I was writing chapter 10 of my book, a surfboard hit me in the ear and I got a perforated eardrum. And what do you know? Then I've got a weeping ear, I've got a noisy ear, I've got tinnitus, I'm like deaf in the, things happen, right? So I think if people are experiencing triple PD, vestibular migraine, superior canal dehiscence, Meniere's, all these classic kind of vestibular conditions, it's almost like there's that potential sitting there. And so when we do have a stable life around us and emotional regulation and good rituals and routines, and we're feeling, I suppose, connected to our community, often the symptoms are not really bothering us. And if they're there, we don't notice them. We return to an essentially normal, if not thriving life. But that doesn't mean at some point with a pregnancy or menopause or even a job redundancy, which can change our hormones, or COVID, that the potential for that condition to reignite itself and resurface still exists. And so this is where, with my clients who I'm working with, I often say it's not about eliminating and getting rid of. It's not about actually having that certainty. It's about saying, even if it comes back, or even if I'm faced with a really challenging trauma down the track, I've got the toolkit, I've got the resources, I can meet that challenge and I can regulate, I can self-soothe. If I lose my stability and steadiness, I can re-find it. It's no problem. That feels good, because it's like I can face any day, no matter. I've got my umbrella, I've got my rain jacket, I can go into the storm. That's how I felt in pregnancy. So I had two major vestibular kind of incidents that I'll share. And it is very common. Hormones are pretty crazy. But look, I was very well prepared. I'd done all the right things in terms of nourishment and rest and spiritual rites of passage. I was really slowing down. So my body wasn't under that much duress. However, then I moved house, which is a stressful incident. I had an overseas wedding. So I was traveling overseas and I was the bride. That was with overseas family. That was stressful. And my mum had a stroke, which was extremely stressful. So then you start going, okay, what can be normal hormones that are even rocky anyway? Then you add in moving house, overseas travel, and a significant loss in the family. She recovered really well, but at that point it's like a loss. It's like, oh my God, my mum's not present. So I did have to ride the waves. And one incident was just a normal day. I went on a really gentle bike ride down the street to do normal odd jobs. And I had about a 40-minute dizziness episode, and it was really vulnerable. I couldn't protect myself. I couldn't protect my baby. And what I did was it came on slowly. There was I had at least a minute or two notice. And I went into a cafe that I knew told the waitress, ordered a banana smoothie or something with sugar in it, just in case like I needed a sugar hit. I wasn't really sure what was going on. Asked her to bring me water. I told her I was dizzy, and that was kind of my safety net of, if they need to call the ambulance or something, there's someone there who's going to keep an eye on me. Anyway, I sat down and I rested my head, and again, that's another major coping mechanism for me when I do have vestibular spins, is I close my eyes. I don't engage with it, you know, and I feel much safer closing my eyes in my body than I do out there. And that, I think that's because of my yoga background. So not everybody's like that. Some people close their eyes and freak out even more. And that'll be part of their healing, will be finding a way to be safe in their body, because that is a huge part of settling the vestibular system.
And many people have visual stimulation problems as well.
Yeah, which I get. So closing my eyes can be essential. So yes, that took about 40 minutes. And I just did all the rock steady stuff on myself. You know, I had to self-soothe, I had to talk to myself, I had to be pragmatic and practical and check I was actually safe and not dying. You know, you've got to just tick all your boxes. And then I had to write it out, and I had to be patient, and I had to trust. And it's moving through, it's like from that day onwards, I think I started to realize, okay, I can't treat myself or my body like I did before being pregnant. It kind of became a line in the sand. It's like, now I need to be gentle and tender and not, what's the word? It's like I had to treat myself like a new person. I was now a young woman carrying a baby. I couldn't just jump on my bike willy-nilly and go down the street. I had to really check in. Have I had enough fluids, or is it too hot? You know, it was summertime. And so I think that was almost like, for me, it was like a little notice. It was like my body telling me, you know, you can't keep pretending things aren't changing. So that was kind of like how I made my peace with that incident. And then the second one was tinnitus. I got these really weird tinnitus sounds while pregnant, which did throw me off a little bit, these new sounds. And because we had a new place of living, a new home, I thought one of the neighbors had a swimming pool, and it was a pool cleaner. It had that kind of room, and my husband couldn't hear it, even though I kept asking him. I'm like, where is that? And I'm looking for it. And then of course I'm like, no way, like, really? And then I realized, okay, it's a body sound. I'm going to have to do all the tricks on myself, and I'm going to have to start using all the neuroplasticity. So I have so many examples of being faced with new and challenging, not quite right sensations or sounds, and using the neuroplasticity skills again and again to reset them. And I'm completely normal. I have no symptoms right now. Doesn't mean things won't change, but if it does change, I've got the tools to work through it again. And I think for me, that's what it means to have these vestibular conditions, is we can have, you know, normal, healthy, thriving lives. I think if we have the education and support to keep our brain coming back to center and coming back to normal, instead of feeling as though we have to live perpetually like I did. I thought I had to live always in this shameful, abnormal, sensitive, not quite right space forever. I just thought that was it. And I feel like it'd be nice to shift that story for all vestibular patients around the world, that yes, we can have an episodic cluster, and then we can come back to normal. Physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, we can recenter. The brain is so adaptable. And learning to really engage that human capacity to adapt and change, I think is where, in a sense, as a vestibular audiologist in Western treatment models, I felt we were letting clients down because we were not nurturing that journey. We were testing them, testing clients, getting, you know, medication and MRI reports through doctors, getting some vestibular rehabilitation therapy or psychology support. And then it was just kind of, we'll go live with it. That's as good as it gets, the coping and tolerating. Whereas I really feel like we can do so much more than that. And we can have a very sensitive, tailored, real-time response to, I'm feeling this, I'm going to support it by doing that. And I'm going to reset my settings by choosing this. And to have this happening in real time just changes everything.
I think a lot of people hear that this is as good as it gets, and it's really about reframing that. And you're rather than saying this is as good as it gets, it's this is what my normal is, and this is going to be my reaction to it, and I have a toolbox to cope with that. And everybody is going to have their own toolbox. You know, everybody has different things that they're going to put in their toolbox that work for them. So you were talking about your book that you wrote recently, Rock Steady. Can you what's the core message of your book?
Well, I felt like I really had to write this book. And I suppose the core message is what I've been seeing over the last 10 years in not only just experiencing these symptoms and knowing with conviction that they can and do rewire, reset, and recalibrate, because I've experienced it, but also just seeing that in hundreds and thousands of people. And so it really felt like, to me, there was a lot of misinformation and inaccurate information out there on the internet and out in the world. And I wanted to have a friendly, easy to read, integrated resource which said, okay, this is where the doctors are coming from, and they're doing an incredible job at investigating symptoms and trying to give us medical clearance. Are we dying? That's their big question. And if we're dying, how can they prevent that? And then it kind of gets to a point with doctors where they're like, okay, well, I'm done. There's not much more I can do. I've investigated everything. I feel really happy with your ears and your brain and all of that. So from my perspective, they then want to refer on. And then it can just go into a big referral process of, we get referred to the physical therapist or the psychologist or the audiologist. And then it can turn into the osteopath and the chiropractor and the naturopath. And it can just feel like, I still don't feel right. Like, hello, I still don't feel right. I've been to 15 different practitioners. Like, and a lot of people will say, I know there's something that can help me. Like, where is it and what is it? And I believe that missing piece is the self-inquiry. And I think the reason we don't find it, and I didn't find it in my exhaustive goose chase personally, is because I was looking for it outside of myself. I wanted that thing to fix me, that diet or that special scientific paper, right? I was looking outside of myself for something that is a very personal, invisible story in my inner world. It's the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual journey of what I'm sensing and feeling in my body. And I'm the expert in that. I'm the person I have to consult. And so my book talks about how this is a very common dilemma across the world, you know, Europe, Africa, Asia, the Americas, Australasia. And I think the doctors are doing a wonderful job, and we need to have realistic expectations about where their expertise begins and ends. And I think we have to understand that, you know, many psychologists and audiologists and physical therapists are not trained in vertigo and tinnitus symptoms. They're trained in other elaborate and extensive areas of the human body. But we often get secondhand information from professionals who really want to help us, but it's not necessarily tailored information for our needs. And I think that can build up into this accumulation of confusion. And so I guess I want to cut slack for some of those health professionals out there who are doing their best. But the message often can be, well, you know, just put a podcast on and ignore it, or just, you know, cope and tolerate and accept. And acceptance is a piece, but I think acceptance often gets confused with toleration and live with it. So I think there's a bit of Chinese whispers going on as well. So yes, the main message of my book is self-inquiry, which means I think the missing piece is education about how remarkable the inner ears, the eyes, the spinal column and the brain are, and how they can adapt and reset. So even if we have had 20 or 30 years of triple PD or vestibular migraine, and we have not felt right forever, I have seen time and time again people reset and rewire that and go back to normal, and they feel strong, they feel confident, they feel calm, they feel at ease, they feel a deep sense of relaxation. And the only reason for that is because they learned how to cultivate it. They learned how to generate those brain chemical cocktails in themselves. I didn't do it for them. I simply gave them the roadmap. and gave them the options to explore. And it's this trial and error and this willingness that I think sets people aside who do the hard yards. And you know, for me, it was 4 years. I've had other clients who took 3 years. Some people as quick as a few weeks or a few months. We're all so different. But yes, so the book is really about the experiential process of healing. By experiential, I mean you actually can't get somebody else to do it for you, take a pill or read about it or watch a video. It's something we go through by feeling and practicing and embodying. And by doing that, we change how our neurons fire. And we change how our neurons fire, we change how we feel. And when we change how we feel and we do that repeatedly, we end up actually automating and rewiring the system. So we get an entirely new sense of normal that we co-create. So instead of dealing with the normal that we don't want, we actually create an entirely new normal that we do desire. And that is the process of neuroplasticity. It sounds simple. It's actually not simple.
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. It sounds like a simple process, and it is not, either physically, mentally, or emotionally. And everybody has a different reaction to it. Everyone has a different relationship with it. What advice would you give to someone who's just starting their vestibular journey, who is maybe they haven't even figured out what is going on with them physically yet? Maybe they don't even have a diagnosis, but they're feeling these you know, this anxiety and unknowing you know, what's going to happen and whether it's going to be with them forever.
First of all, I think I would say trust what you're feeling, because what you're feeling is real, and it's a real feeling that is physically moving through your body, so you're not making it up. Secondly, it would be trust your doctors will give you medical clearance even if you don't get a clear diagnosis. And for some people, you'll see 5 different doctors and 5 different doctors give you 5 different labels and different names, and it can be very intimidating and confusing. So really seek medical clearance to the point of asking, do I have medical clearance? And get them to explain that to you in detail, because that's the great gift of the medical world, is understanding medical clearance. I'm not dying, I'm okay, I feel wonky, but I'm okay. And then I would definitely urge you to explore the power of your brain and body to change, heal, and adapt. There are so many amazing case studies and recovery stories available now. There wasn't previously, but now there's a lot on the internet. And I think try and expose yourself to healing and recovery stories instead of those stories or support groups where people are really feeling very stuck forever in symptoms, which can lead to feeling more helpless, hopeless, and powerless. And I don't know that that's where I would want to start my healing journey. So get education, find groups that help lift you up and inspire you, and definitely just trust your body. Your body is talking to you, and your body will guide you actually through the healing. And that is the gift of neuroplasticity, is you feel, respond, and in that feel, respond pattern, generate entire new brain chemical and brain chemistry and neural firing patterns. So in essence, the answer's inside of our body, which sounds really cheesy, doesn't it? It's like, you know, I was looking out there and it was in me all along. That's kind of true. Your brain and your body will guide you as to how to heal. And I don't think anybody can rush that process, but I would love to just put that little seedling of a thought out there. And I think when the time is right and when the willingness is there, it will all make sense. That's what I've noticed in people. So it can make no sense for months and years, and suddenly they're like, oh, I get it. And it feels amazing.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. When you're not ready to hear it, you're not going to hear it. And what you were saying, I think very much lines up with what we have on our patient toolkit on Vita's website. You know, first learn about what is going on for you. Learn about the medical aspects of vestibular disorders so that you can be an advocate for your healthcare, so that you can have conversations with healthcare providers, find the right healthcare providers who understand vestibular disorders, so that they, so that you have confidence that they can, that what they tell you is what there is to know. And then find find your support system. And there are so many support systems out there now, especially, with the internet and all of the online support groups, the Facebook groups, and everybody is going to connect with a different group in a different way. But there are lots of opportunities there. And Vita's got some links on our website. And then look. Next is looking for these other, once, as you said, you get medical clearance, which means that your doctors have done all that they can for you. That doesn't mean that they've fixed you, but they've done all that they can for you. That there are other things out there that can help you to find balance in your life in a more metaphysical way, if you will. So, is there anything else that you wanted to add? And please share your website so that people can find you.
Oh, sure. I'm just thinking if there's anything else I want to add. I feel like my take-home message would be, you may not realize it yet, but you are the expert in you. You know you better than anybody else on this planet. And this is a really powerful time for you to step in and say, okay, I don't feel quite right, and I don't know why yet, but I'm going to stay with it. I'm going to not abandon myself. I'm not going to rush out, try and get other people to solve my problems for me. I'm going to get a support team to hold me and really allow me to step into this place of being the expert in me, because I don't feel like it yet. And I want you to know you are the expert in you, and you have probably a lot more power inside of you, in your brain, in your body, in your ears than you realize. And I am really excited for you to feel that power. So that would be my closing words. And if you're interested to follow me on my YouTube channel, I've got a podcast for those people who are visually sensitive. And I have so many supportive and educational resources. You can visit seekingbalance.com.au, or you can probably Google Joey and vertigo and I'll pop up. But yeah, just wishing that you find the support resources that you need.
Thank you, Joey. Thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for all that you do for vestibular patients, and thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much. And thanks to Veda. We refer to Veda resources from Australia too. They're incredible. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thanks everybody for joining us. And if you have any questions or want to get in contact with Joey, contact Vita, go to our website, vestibular.org, call us 1-800-837-8428, or email us at info@vestibular.org. Thanks everybody. Good night.